Hello and welcome to Give Me the Remote. It's episode 44 and it is the 11th of July 2019. My name is Sheridan and I am joined in the pod by my co-host John.
Hello everyone, and how are you tonight?
They're good.
And how are you?
I'm good.
Oh, you're good. Okay. No one cares how I am, huh?
I think we just all assumed you were doing brilliantly.
Really?
Maybe. Do you want to talk about your
Jeez.
feelings?
People don't know me very well, do they?
Do you want to talk about your feelings? How you doing? I don't know if that's the show everyone's tuned in for, though.
Not really. Now, we apologise for the delay. We won't apportion blame at this point. Let's just move on. What do we got?
We've got When They See Us.
Nothing in these boys' state matches the central facts of the crime.
All we need is for one to tie this whole thing together.
These tapes are not as clean as the state would have you believe.
Right.
You're like, do we have to start with the most depressing
thing ever made?
Yeah.
It's not the most depressing thing ever made, but it's right up there in terms of, I mean, it's sort of, I guess in somewhat, I was going to say Shawshank Redemption, but that's unfair to this. Not that Shawshank Redemption isn't a well-loved film about being in prison.
So this is based on a true story about a group of boys known as the Central Park Five that were accused and convicted of raping a jogger in Central Park.
In the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it might have been the 90s.
No, they finally got out in the 90s, I thought.
They got out only fairly recently. Anyway, I think it was the 90s. Anyway, so they were aged between 14 and I think 16 or 17. So most of them were actually very, very young. Basically, they went on kind of, I guess, what we would maybe call larking.
You mean larking about?
Yeah, they were larking about. Well, I just feel like I've just aged myself.
I don't know where this larking comes from.
They were kind of larking around in Central Park.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of them had committed some minor kind of disturbances. But there was no real hardcore criminal activity going on.
There was nothing that would have attracted the police whatsoever if they had been in a wealthy neighbourhood in a white family.
Yeah. And so a female jogger got raped very brutally in Central Park, but
for those who don't know, Central Park is vast.
Yes.
Things can be happening in one part of Central Park and 1,000 people in other parts of Central Park will have no idea.
Yeah. And then, so she was raped very brutally and was unconscious, though, for the duration of the rape, so had no recollection of it. So she was unable to identify any witnesses. There was no DNA evidence. These kids were picked up by police because they were larking about, and they proceeded to, almost all of them, provide false confessions.
Now, this comes back to these forms of police interrogation that they briefly touch on in this are enormously discredited.
Yes.
It will get you a confession because you're applying the weight of the state to young people lacking legal advice, but you will not get at the truth with what they do.
Yes. And these were all very young people, some of them whose parents were, I think you could probably say, lacked education, and were certainly, felt as though they had to just say yes to the police because they, being black people or Hispanics, felt as though, they didn't want to get in any trouble. And
some of them were in parole situations as well and were getting threatened by the police. But the fundamental point is no minor should be interrogated by police without a lawyer present.
Or without just even a social worker or representative that could represent them.
And if you are being interrogated in relation to a serious crime, don't say anything until you get a lawyer is fundamentally sound advice in any legal system. Yeah.
And, I mean, the one that was sent away for the longest, Corey Wise, who I think is really the main kind of subject of this series in the end, he had a minor disability and was actually not even present with the group in Central Park. He actually went with one of them to the police station to help, just to accompany him, and then proceeded to provide a false confession that he raped this woman, or was involved in the rape of the woman, and went away
under coercive interrogation.
Under very coercive interrogation, and went to prison for 15 years or something. So it is a horrible story. So the way the structure of this series is set up is it follows what starts on the night of the event and then really follows their arrest and conviction through the court process. And that's probably half of the series. And then the other half, which is where it gets really grim, is them in prison. And Corey Wise was put into an adult prison at the age of 17. And American prisons are very brutal places for, especially if, black people that have been convicted of rape. Like they don't go to the same places that bloody Jeffrey Epstein goes to.
Yeah. The second half of this is mostly about how horrific the prison system can be. How if you're lucky and there's a half decent guard responsible for your care, maybe things won't be so bad, but then they've got their lives, they go somewhere else, you get someone else, and you go back to being in a hellish nightmare-scape. And it's a fundamental problem with prison systems in that they tend, because no one cares too much about convicted felons, and there's certainly very few votes in caring for convicted felons, these places just decay into hellscapes. And we're talking about a lot of savage beating and a lot of brutal sexual assault. And no one, even who's convicted of a terrible rape, even if they were guilty, the judge isn't sentencing them to be brutally sexually assaulted and beaten daily. He's only being sentenced for the deprivation of their liberty. But all these other things happen because there's a lack of care in society. And in a case like this, where it turns out that they were innocent the whole time, yes, they get given, in the American system, a big pile of money. But that's not justice any which way.
So, yeah, after it came out that basically their convictions weren't overturned until a serial rapist confessed to the crime and provided details about that crime, which only he could have given. And I believe there was some DNA evidence also that proved that he was there. But the DNA evidence was pretty scant in the case. The story actually has has significant relevance today because Donald Trump, and this is shown in this series, during their trial, took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty and that it should apply to rapists, and solely because of this group of boys. And even to this day, Donald Trump still claims that they convicted these crimes.
Committed the crimes.
Committed the crimes, yeah.
Yeah, but, if you ever end up in a trial and Donald Trump's your judge, you're in a lot of trouble. Although, hello, elected judges. I don't know if our prisons in this country are necessarily any better. I think they're a lot less documented. And I know in some of our prisons some pretty horrific things do happen.
I don't think we don't have the same problem though with the huge amounts of overcrowding. We have some problem, and it depends on what state you're in too, and that would be the case in the US. But I don't think you'd want to be in a Northern Territory prison at the moment.
No, but the only people in Northern Territory prison are Indigenous.
Indigenous, and for anyone that doesn't know, every single child that is currently in prison in the Northern Territory is Indigenous. And
we also, let's be fair for our American listeners, we have a huge problem in this country that we have a artificially high Indigenous suicide rate because they're just getting murdered in custody, and it's been called suicide to avoid investigation. And if you actually broke those numbers out properly, you'd have... There's a reason why the numbers don't get broken out properly. Yeah. This is, I guess, we've spoken a lot really about the story because the story is fascinating and obviously just awful. But as a show, it's a little patchy at times. I think the second half that is about the prison system
is very moving, and it's very difficult to watch actually at times.
It is, and they really highlight this horrible double jeopardy situation in particularly the American justice system. Let's swing the bat where it's due, where the system demands compliance to the point where you have to admit you did the thing, even if you didn't do it, even if you say you didn't do it, and they won't give you parole until you admit that you committed the crime and then claim contrition for it. And sure, I get that in the vast majority of cases, the person convicted is the person who committed the crime. I don't think anyone's got a firm statistic on that, but I'll go for the sake of argument with the vast majority. But we should accept that some people are wrongly convicted, and if they've been model prisoners and their parole date is up and they're unlikely to be a further threat to society, I personally don't understand why they're insisting on this admission of guilt. And yeah,
I mean, I think maybe it's a little different in a crime like rape that is so personal that really, in order to satisfy the victims that parole is appropriate, there would be some kind of... You would think that you would need some sort of contrition about the impact of such a rape.
I guess if you're going to do that sort of thing, you need a better justice system.
Well, that's right. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right.
And it's not that hard. We know what a better justice system looks like. It's one where people have decent legal representation throughout and aren't being asked to make decisions about their guilt or innocence without recourse to legal advice. And that second half of this is, I mean, what was it? There's that show Oz, movies like The Shawshank Redemption. There's been countless movies about the prison experience. And this is a 4-5 hour version of that. Yeah,
I mean, look, I love me a good prison show. I'll watch all those bloody girls incarcerated stuff on TV. I loved Oz.
Caged Heat, huh?
I find it fascinating. But I actually, to be honest, found this very hard going myself. I found it very upsetting, and I got emotional on several occasions. And I think the actor that plays Corey Wise, I think his name's Jarrell Jerome. I might have that wrong. But he was amazing. Just a really, really heartfelt performance.
Yeah, it's a thoroughly competent telling of a story, was my feeling watching it. There wasn't a lot glaring out at me as poor production values or continuity errors or anything like that. And the acting is all entirely competent to the point where all of that technical stuff just disappears and you're just watching the story. Yeah,
well, and there's some scenes in that second half where basically Corey just goes into solitary confinement repeatedly because that's his way of avoiding getting bashed and raped. And the acting in that is phenomenal, because I mean that is quite a difficult thing to act in a way that's not overacted, because you're basically in a cell on your own at times, going a bit batty. And I felt as though it was just a really solid performance that was quite difficult.
The thing I would say in terms of the treatment of parole that I was trying to get to before was that some of them just said, yep, I did it and I'm sorry, and got released. And the ones who were the most honest ones were just like, I can't say I'm sorry for something I didn't do. And so they rotted for another 7 years. Well,
I think a lot of the thing with the convictions or the sentencing was that the younger ones had smaller sentences because they were young.
Yeah.
I really actually liked Felicity Huffman, who is from Desperate Housewives, actually, who plays the lawyer, the prosecutor.
Yeah, because she comes in and she's like talking to them like she's one of them, and you think, oh, this is a nice person, everything's going to go well, and boy, she turns.
And that woman today still argues that they did it.
Well, she's protecting herself by that argument as well.
Well, I'm not really sure as a prosecutor. I mean, to be fair to her, she was given a case where all of them had confessed. I'm not saying that she should be exonerated or that she's blameless or whatever.
Yeah, I
but
would
I'm just
say...
saying she did have an out as a prosecutor to say, well, I was presented with this evidence.
But their confessions were all contradictory.
Yes, I agree.
And anyone going through those confessions with a fair mind should have said these confessions are garbage because they're all contradictory.
Well, I mean, they did do that in the trial.
Yeah. But anyway, a grave injustice was done, and
also like a fascinating look though, which I think they probably could have explored a little bit more, is like false confessions, because that is actually a real issue that has not really been looked at in the justice system until probably the last decade or so, because of these change in police techniques, which they do go into.
They do a bit. I mean, the biggest issue is simply that the prisons are private businesses, and those prisons write the model codes to fill those prisons that all the legislatures across the US sign up to, because otherwise they'll be hit with advertising campaigns saying they're weak on law and order. There are huge structural problems, and the UK is going through a process of privatising its prisons, and they're now going through the same public law and order panics being put about by the prison companies to fill their prisons. So it's don't let your prisons get privatised if you can help it. Some horrible things are going to happen. How are you going to start this one?
I think I'm going to have to give it 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
Only because, well, I think the second half of it is just brilliant.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be going back for more, I can tell you.
That's my problem. But
and I found it I didn't want to watch more than one in a row, because it took us a long time to watch this show, actually.
We did watch, I think, 3 in a row at the end. It flows better at the end,
it does.
even though it's harder to watch.
The second half is much better. And also because, I mean, I had watched a couple of other true crime documentaries and listened to some podcasts about this case, so I knew quite a bit about it. But after watching the show, it did actually make me, like, go back through, read all that, find out about it. And I think it touched on some quite complex issues around the justice system, like police techniques, and it didn't go in as much as I'd like, but they're kind of not things
it was already very long.
Yeah, I know, but they're not things you don't usually see that kind of nuance in these kind of, you know, dramas for TV. So I really thought it was a really, really good outing.
Yeah. Now look, in terms of its production, I'm not going to take a star off it or the message it's saying. Absolutely 5 stars. As entertainment.
Well, yeah, but is that what you're rating?
I'm just saying I'm only going to give it 4 stars just because, great as it is, and everyone should watch it, as I'll say, it's very unpleasant to watch as well.
Yeah, but that's actually what, to me, that's what you should give it 5 stars.
This is you're coming at me with my anti-Marie Kondo argument now. I'm saying it doesn't spark joy, and you're like, great art doesn't always inspire joy. Spark joy. But anyway, I stand by my 4-star rating. I don't think it could be made any better. I don't enjoy watching people suffering, and there's a lot of that in this. Okay, so what next?
Well, I think we should just, go 180 and just go murder mystery.
Charles is inviting us to spend the weekend with him on a yacht.
Crashing the party with civilians.
You're an actress, right?
Grace Ballard.
I am Nick Spit.
Okay, so this is one of the most watched movies ever put on Netflix. It is Adam Sandler in his worst late career mumble. It's Jennifer Aniston sleepwalking.
Yeah.
But
Jennifer Aniston is a fairly reliable rom-com sort of girl next door actor.
She is capable of greatness in the right role. In Horrible Bosses, she lit up the screen.
So still her sleepwalking. If it did not have Jennifer Aniston in this movie, it would be unwatchable.
Yeah, but I still wouldn't say this is a great.
It's barely watchable as it is.
Yeah, but it's just a by-the-numbers murder procedural.
Well, that's what I said to you. I felt like it was a movie that was made by algorithm.
Yeah.
And that it just went to find all of the bits that would appeal to the broadest, most middle-of-the-road audience.
Yeah.
And then it was offered up to me as a suggestion on Netflix, and I took it down.
I would actually say this satirises the ludicrous nature of the Agatha Christie formula, though.
Oh, you think it's doing something that clever, do you?
I think it is.
I don't think it is. So, give us a synopsis.
I don't know. Someone gets murdered, and a rich person gets murdered. That's right.
Jennifer Aniston and her husband have been going through a little bit of a funk in their life/marriage. And so they go on a holiday. Mm-hmm. And on that holiday, she meets a really rich millionaire while at a bar one night. And he offers...
The bar was on the plane.
Oh, sorry, on the plane. You're right. You are right. It was on the plane. And how are these people affording first class?
Well, they didn't afford first class. Remember, they snuck into first class.
See, I'm already forgetting all the details of this movie.
Anyway, there is the whole thing of if you meet someone super wealthy and they say, "Oh, you must come hang out with me," it could be there's something really nasty they want to pin on you, and that's not necessarily bad advice.
So they go hang out, and someone gets murdered, and then it's a murder mystery.
Yeah,
surprise.
With ludicrous racial... See, I think it is satire. All the ludicrous racial stereotypes, straight satire of Agatha Christie and her, what seemed like exotic characters in the 1920s.
Well,
and
it riffed off so many of, like, Agatha Christie, Clue,
Clue was just riffing off an Agatha Christie.
Yeah, I guess you're right, actually.
Yeah, but the idea that, everyone will meet and the detective will lay out the evidence and the murderer will confess, and then constables come take them away. This plays to all of that, and it's all ludicrous. I don't believe it's how things worked in the 1920s either. It's certainly not how things work now, but it does make for an entertaining 3-act whodunit, where as the audience you're trying to second guess the motivations of the characters on screen.
Wow, you've thought way more about this than me.
Okay.
I'm actually kind of worried about what star rating you're going to give it.
No.
I don't even know what else to say about this movie, in that it's just really, really mediocre.
Really mediocre, I would say it is barely adequate, but it does serve its purpose as, like it says on the tin, murder mystery.
Well,
they're not hiding what it's trying to be.
And I actually sat there for probably a good hour, a bit over an hour, without even picking my phone up, which is really unusual when I'm not enjoying a movie. Mm-hmm. And then I realised, because I think it was like scrolling on your phone. Like I was just mindlessly doing it without knowing I was doing it.
What's next? Yeah.
It was kind of just offering me just sort of mediocrity, and I just took it mindlessly.
Mm. I think in a family you could have a lot of fun watching it, ironically. And
isn't there some sex in it though? Why is it just sexual innuendo?
I don't think so. It's a bit of innuendo. But... innuendo.
How many stars are you giving it?
3.
Oh my god, I am giving it 1.
You watched it for an hour without touching your phone.
But it's stupid. It was so awful.
Yeah. Well,
and Adam Sandler, you cannot understand him.
No, he mumbles like crazy. It's the whole second half of his career he's been mumbling.
Has he?
Yeah.
I don't think I've watched much second half.
Since Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah, right.
It's been... I think he thinks it makes him sound tough or something, and directors obviously don't have the guts to say, Adam, pronounce your words. Or maybe he's had a stroke. And this is just... No, we're not going to mock people with strokes.
No.
They're a weird group, but it's still somehow okay too. But, there we go.
I don't think it is.
No. All right. Anyway, 3 stars from me, and how many from you? 1.
1.
Wow. So what's next?
It's really like a rollercoaster ride of emotions, this podcast. So we're going to do Stranger Things now. Stranger Things Season 3.
Yes.
It's building something.
No matter what happens, we have to stop him. Together.
Can I just put my cards on the table?
Yeah.
The greatest 10 hours of television ever made.
Ever made?
Ever made.
Ever.
Wow. It's a little slow in the first half, but once it takes off, I mean, it's just wow. It's set on the 4th of July, 30 years ago, when the weekend that Back to the Future opened. And it is just such a rollicking ride. The one thing I will say you've got to get in your head watching this is a child's imagining of the world, not a faithful depiction of the world.
Why? What do you mean?
Russian, the Russian base under the town.
Oh, sorry. I thought there was generally an assumption that this wasn't a realistic depiction of the world, given, you know, the cloud monster that's roaming around.
But you can have fantasy themes set in a world that is similar to ours.
Yeah.
And
they could have had it down there.
Well, who was feeding the Russians? How did they move all that heavy equipment down there?
Burger. But this whole, I mean, that's just such a nostalgia nod, though, to...
Oh, yeah, America, Cold War.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I mean, the references, it's a Where's Wally cartoon.
They even talk about New Coke.
Yeah.
Which, in Australia, I don't think we got New Coke.
We never had the Cola Wars in this country either. Coca-Cola's just dominated this country forever.
So anyway, New Coke South. Was a very... I mean, they talk about it to this day, and when you learn marketing and whatnot.
Yeah.
Basically, Coke released New Coke, where they just said, no, we're not selling we've improved the recipe, and it went down like a lead balloon.
See, I would question whether it actually did. It cost them sales for a couple of quarters, but it made the conversation all about them, and Coca-Cola is still a dominant player in the soft drink industry. It's type 2 diabetes is going to kill off Coca-Cola long before the long-term damage of New Coke does.
Well, I mean, that was back then when it was really dominating, because no one knew about diabetes, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, we digress.
So
what I really liked about this was they all came back, but they're a bit older. They're definitely teenagers now.
Yeah.
And...
Teenagers, not kids. Their bikes have changed. They're not on BMXs. They're all on road bikes now.
Yeah, their passion.
Yeah. And they have fun with the rules parents have for kids in a room on their own. The door must be open 3 inches, you know. So it was I actually felt like a bit sort of like a parent that was watching their child grow up. And they have a lot of fun with this. There's so many movies they reprise, but The Breakfast Club and all those John Hughes movies about the pain of growing up. They touch on a lot of that stuff beautifully. One of the girls coming out as a lesbian is handled with a great deal of sweetness, I thought.
I thought that was a very appropriate and well handled touch. That it seemed like normal.
But it was a beautiful story of friendship with an edge. And it's just a tiny part of the show, but it was just beautifully, wonderfully done. And the end result, it was 2 people who were friends and helping each other.
Yeah, and I think it was quite nice that they, didn't taint it with what would have been, it would have been pretty rubbish coming out as a lesbian in 1980, whatever. It wasn't really a thing that you did in high school with much acceptance, probably.
They were in between high school and college at that point for those.
But anyway, for anyone coming out back then would have been very difficult. But I like that they didn't bring that in, really, because I think that's actually like a nice message of acceptance for kids watching it today.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's rewriting history,
but in some ways it was like taking your John Hughes movies, your Breakfast Clubs, and recasting it for a modern audience.
Yeah.
And doing it well.
Yeah. I've got a question for you, though.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to someone at work the other day trying to recommend shows that kids could watch on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And me and someone else said Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was watching season 3, and the references on this to movies that are relevant to my generation is just off the hook. Like, it's crazy. They go over the top with it big time in an amazing way.
Yeah, a 10-year-old watching it today is not going to get any of the cultural references. They're just going to see a rollicking story.
So, but do you think they still see it? Is it as good if the nostalgia's not there?
I can't speak for a 10-year-old.
Or what about a 15-year-old?
I can't speak for them either. I think they're going to have a different experience watching it, just like someone coming to Star Wars as a 9-year-old now and watching it from episode 1 to 9 is going to have a totally different experience to those of us who jumped in at episode 4.
I know, but I mean, because like that for that new Coke example though, that would have just gone. I mean, you probably would have been like, "Why are they talking about Coke?"
A lot of what they do in this is demonstrating and reminding us what life was like before we had mobile phones and the internet.
Yeah, which is why it's...
And it's part of the fun of it. And the big scene where they have to figure out, and I won't go into why, but figure out Planck's constant, which is a mathematical 8-digit, well, it's longer than that. But anyway, it's a number. They needed to know what it was, and today...
It was very hard for them.
Today you just pull up your phone, but in this, it was sort of goes to a phone a friend scenario, and the friend is holding them to ransom, and meanwhile monsters are chasing people, and people are dying, and... I will give you, one of the best scenes I've probably ever seen. Yeah.
And a weird... So anyway, this does happen... in a very climactical moment in the film where they just sort of digress.
Beautifully.
You can't give it away, but
No.
they digress into this silly game. And usually that kind of, like a jarring point like that in a narrative and in a very climactical moment of a film is just really annoying. Like we talked about this last week with the movie by the guy who made The Big Short. The one about Cheney.
Yeah, Vice. Mm-hmm.
That they just do these digressive techniques all the time, and you're like...
No, but in Vice they did it badly, and
yeah,
in this
and
they did it so well.
Because I'm like... Because when I was talking about it in Vice, I'm like, that is very, very difficult to do. I couldn't even think of a time when I'd really seen it done that well at the time. And then this week, presented to me in Stranger Things, and it is done amazingly.
But I think it was because of the way they did it, where the action continues through the scene, and it's juxtaposing... someone who isn't even aware of what's going on, wanting to be sweet talked before they'll hand over a bit of information, and holding that in contrast to Carnage, and it's
very clever,
yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that makes it so great is those kids are really good actors, all of them, I think.
Yeah, they've certainly grown with these roles as well.
Yeah, I mean, I find Eleven as a character she's a funny sort of heroine because she at times doesn't have a lot of emotion.
There's a whole fish out of water thing, but she's just so beautifully played.
Yeah.
And I find her incredibly captivating.
Yeah.
And like she goes to the shopping mall, and instead of being dressed up by the sheriff who's adopted her, she starts dressing fashionably. And I mean, I remember you going, "Oh my god, I want that outfit."
She's very well dressed in it. I will give her that.
Stranger Things 2.
It really didn't.
Can now be viewed as just the difficult middle act.
Yeah. The difficult second album.
Well, it was just
the third.
It was the middle act. Apparently, there is going to be a season 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
because I've got to be honest. When I saw that end, I was like, "This is a brilliant ending."
They've wrapped it up. Why come back to this?
I felt though they were wrapping it up.
Apparently, there's a scene at the end of the credits where they set it up again. But if you're watching it on Netflix, you don't see the credits because it dumps you out into the screen and suggests.
No, we did watch it.
Did we?
Yeah. Oh, no, I didn't think that set it up.
Anyway.
We definitely watched it.
I've been talking to people who've got a different view on that. But
I just thought it was a weird little funny...
Okay.
Well, because that was kind of... having that thing after the credits is what you expect from a decent show now.
But anyway, I think what they've achieved here is a show that's a great show full of action and adventure and daring do for a younger generation to watch, and that is so packed with clever telling references, and a bit like when Tarantino's at his best, that he can grab things that, yes, they've been done before, but give them a new twist and breathe new life into them and make them part of the modern world.
Well, I mean, the reason Tarantino's so good at that, though, is because he recognises that most film now is actually just people redoing what's been done before. You've just got to do it really, really well.
Well, any storytelling, there are only 7 stories.
Exactly,
so,
yeah. Like, and that is a sort of self-awareness that I think makes Tarantino, when he's really on his game, a great director, because he knows what he's doing. And I think that's why this is such a good show. They're self-aware of all of that.
So I would say, look, if you haven't watched Stranger Things, then go start in season 1 and work your way through.
Just deal with season 2. It's not that bad.
It's not bad. It's just a bit meh compared to the heights of season 1 and the mastery of season 3.
I like that you were lost for words there. Lost for an adjective rarely gets you.
I wanted to get the right one, and I think I got there. It's as good. We talked about how Game of Thrones is sort of like an endpoint for an era of television that they're not going to attempt a story like this for some time, and hopefully Stranger Things won't try and go to 8 seasons the way Game of Thrones did. But I also feel we know that this era of television is coming to an end because the companies aren't willing to let Netflix own it. And we're heading into a future now where audience is going to be much smaller and shows are going to be fragmented across 6 or 7 networks, and most people are going to subscribe to 2 or 3, which is going to mass audiences are going to disappear.
I don't know.
And Stranger Things, which burst onto the scene as one of the blossoming of Netflix's early fruits, is really going to be something we look back on as iconic for this era. I fear for the future. I'm not paying for another service.
John, we pay for every single one.
I know. That's why I'm at my limit. Frankly, we're probably going to have to subscribe to the Disney service when it comes out. But
what's the Disney service?
Disney's launching their own Netflix style thing, and now.
I didn't know that was happening in Australia. Anytime soon, though.
Once they launch in America, I don't think it's going to be long here. In the moment in Australia, Stan has a lot of the Disney content, but Disney's not going to let them.
The thing though that you can do with streaming services is
Turn
switch in and out, and
but we know we don't. Which is why we don't want to subscribe to the 5th service.
But honestly, if you went for the 5th service now, you'd drop off one of them. You would.
Yeah, Foxtel is...
Foxtel, let's just leave that aside because that's a weird anomaly in the Australian market. But
but
you'd probably drop off Stan.
Again, weird anomaly in the Australian market. We've only got Amazon Prime because we shop so much on Amazon.
And, there's probably lots of people like that all over the world.
Yeah. I mean, there are good shows on Amazon. I would just say that you could probably turn it on for 3 months out of 12 and watch the Amazon shows and then switch it off again if you weren't using the Prime service.
There are lots of consumers out there that are active enough and savvy enough that they turn them on and off.
There are, but the mass audience once something's on. It's like my mother with Netflix. I mean, she's paid for 20 months of Netflix and probably only watched The Crown and The Bodyguard.
Yeah, and she's pretty frugal.
Yeah.
Frugality.
Yeah. Anyway, how many stars for Stranger Things season 3?
I'll probably have to give it 5 stars.
Really? I'm only going to go 4.5.
Oh, I don't do halves though.
There you go.
The finale is very, very good. One of the best shows I've ever seen. Best bits of television.
Yeah, I just loved it, and I felt so happy watching.
I cried.
Yeah, right. See, there weren't any warships being destroyed, so for me, no tears.
Not even. I can't say what happened. I'm crying now thinking about it.
Okay then. Look, thank you very much, folks, for listening to us. We're sorry about the recent hiatus. We have got a lot more shows to talk about, so we hopefully will be back quite soon. In the meantime, do please send us an email to gmtrpodcast@gmail.com or leave comments on any of the social media platforms on which we feature. And as always, do please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, because if you can't be bothered doing that, it gets very hard for us and we feel sad. Do you want us to feel sad? Okay, thanks very much, folks. We'll be back in your ears soon. Good night.
Good night.